Hi there, I'm Vincent Bos and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing your ex's biggest nightmare. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. Check out my socials for extra content. The links are in the description. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing your ex's biggest nightmare. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you will want to know your dumper's mindset. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 of your ex's biggest nightmares. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is they can't find a good match. So if we consider you and your now former partner, originally of course, you were together in a relationship that you didn't want to end, and a relationship that they didn't want to end. Now maybe you find that confusing. Well, if they didn't want to end it, well, why did they then? But we have to consider that originally when you two got together, your ex, the dumper, never imagined becoming the dumper. They never imagined becoming the dumpee. They imagined you two lasting the test of time. Because why would anybody get into a committed relationship if they didn't believe that they wanted it to last forever? So we can safely assume that your ex, the dumper, did have good intentions originally to have this relationship last forevermore. Now, unfortunately, they lost romantic emotional attraction along the way. And when this attraction hit the necessary low point, they felt that they had no option but to action the breakup. They were not feeling fulfilled. They did not believe that you two within a relationship was satisfying and something which they believed was right for them moving forward. It doesn't mean it wasn't right for them in the past or during a good sustained period of their life, but unfortunately in the future they don't see this being a good fit. So what does this mean? Well, it means that your ex, the dumper, is acknowledging that they have made an error of judgment. Now, hopefully you can eventually get your ex back. Feelings change from good to bad and from bad to good. So as a dumpee listening to this, try to stay as relaxed as possible, because there is an opportunity in the future that your ex, the dumper, could have a change of mindset. But right now they feel they've made an error of judgment. They feel that you and them are not a good match going forward. Now this can be somewhat alarming. It can be a feeling of, well, I've invested all of this time, effort, desire, whatever your ex, the dumper, would view it as, the energy they put into the relationship. They feel that it was not the right connection moving forward. So they're feeling that they have not had or found the right match to take them until the end of time. So your ex-dumper is now moving forward on a new path. And even though one of the biggest fears a dumpee has, that their ex is going to meet someone new, that is actually very unlikely for the first year or so, certainly in any serious kind of way. But we have to acknowledge that if you and your now former partner are separated, that the eventual timeline would bring you and them to meet new people. Now, it does sound scary to say, and it isn't something that I want you to be dwelling on, but we have to consider that your ex-dumper, if they're not with you, are eventually going to be trying to find what they deem to be a better match moving forward. And this brings us to the first nightmare that we're speaking about in today's podcast, and that is that they are concerned and they are worried that they can't find a good match. They've already, no doubt, had relationships before they met you. And of course, they didn't work out because they then met you. So now we're in a situation where they also sadly feel that you and them are not a good match. And then now they're starting to add this up and think, well, am I a bad judge of character? All of my prior relationships have failed. What does this mean for me? Well, I hope that I can find the right person next. And this is where the dumper is likely to trip up, because as I've said, it is very unlikely that they will find a new connection anytime soon that is in any way applicable and in any way realistic of something which could work. They might meet someone casually within that first year post-breakup, but the likelihood is it will be a rebound relationship which ends as soon as it begins. And this is because not only are they probably not in the right mindset to really find a new potential partner, but if they are meeting the first person that they see and thinking, okay, this is my new relationship, what are the odds on finding a long-term compatible partner so soon? It's not likely, it's difficult, it's challenging. So the likelihood is the next person they speak to, whether this is online dating, whether this is somebody they bump into somewhere, the likelihood is that this is not going to be a right connection either. Now, maybe at first they think it could be. Maybe they are trying to almost force the issue so that it does become the right fit. But the likelihood is that eventually it will show itself to not be a good match. And this nightmare then starts to play out. All of the relationships before you didn't work. The relationship with you didn't work. And now they've met someone new theoretically, and that hasn't worked. These things can start to build up in your ex-dumper's mind and really start to build upon the thought that they can't find a good match. No matter what they do, where they look, they start to think, well, who is the common denominator in all of this? Well, it's me. I'm the one who is always in these relationships which are not working. And even though this might be a bit unfair on your ex or on anybody who is single, this isn't really something that we can fully put on ourselves, but it is always good to acknowledge that we could be part of the reason why relationships aren't working. Obviously, it's good to look in that metaphorical mirror, but the point is your ex-dumper is likely going to start compounding this on themselves, especially because they dumped you, especially because relationships before you, maybe they were the dumpee, maybe this new connection that they've met, maybe they become the dumpee in that scenario, but with you, they were the dumper. So they add pressure to themselves by thinking, well, did I make the right choice here? Because I've ended this connection and now I'm alone. So this is where we can see that the fear of finding a good match can really put pressure on your ex, and it's absolutely one of their biggest nightmares. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like this video if you're watching on YouTube, and if you have the new hype feature, please hype this video as well. If you like my content, subscribe to the channel to keep updated. And point number 2 is that they are seen as a bad person. So today we're speaking about your ex's biggest nightmares, and point number 2 is something which is absolutely the case for a lot of dumpers. I've been told by so many dumpers via my audio coaching service that they do feel this way. The concern that they are seen as quote unquote the bad guy, the bad man, the bad woman. They are seen as this bad person because they are the dumper. And this can really play on their mindset. Most dumpers are not actual bad people. You might feel very frustrated with your ex right now, but if you're honest with yourself, I would suggest that most of you would think, they're not a bad person. Okay, I'm really hurt. The way they dealt with the breakup probably wasn't great. I feel blindsided by them, but they're not a bad person deep down. And yet, your ex-dumper might be feeling that from many, many people. Not just yourself, but your friends, your family, acquaintances even. All of these people that might view the situation as your ex-dumper ruining something amazing, really upsetting you, and doing it just for themselves. Anybody who is supportive of you is likely to be viewing your ex-dumper in a negative light. And this can really affect your ex-dumper's mindset. They don't want to be seen as the bad person. From their perspective, they had no choice. They lost romantic emotional attraction. They didn't feel the relationship was fulfilling anymore. It wasn't working for them. They felt they had to end the connection. They didn't necessarily want to hurt you. In fact, most dumpers tell me that they absolutely don't want to hurt their dumpee. And it is a fear in itself before the breakup about how, why, when, how exactly they're going to get this point across to you that things aren't working and that they can get the breakup over the line because they're so concerned about your feelings. So if we now consider that your ex-dumper is viewed in a bad light, maybe you've said certain things to them, maybe your friends and family have said or texted them things, your ex-dumper is feeling like they're the worst person in the world, whereas from their perspective, they only did what they felt was necessary. Now, as a dumpee, I'm not expecting you to feel sorry for your ex. This isn't about trying to make you feel that you owe them an apology or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just trying to give you an insight into your ex-dumper's biggest nightmares, because it can be useful to consider things from their perspective, and your ex-dumper is likely going to have moments where they're feeling quite insecure and upset about the fact that they are now seen as a bad person. This is a nightmare they often have before the breakup, and it often comes true because they're not often going to get positive interactions from anybody connected with you. Maybe they've got some friends and family themselves who are supportive of their decision, but by and large, they don't want the negativity. They don't want to be seen in a negative way. And yet, that is very, very likely because it comes with the territory. If you break someone's heart, anybody who loves that person who you have really upset is not likely to be a fan of yours. And hence, this nightmare is often actually a reality. Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website, www.dateme.tips, for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. Talking about your feelings can also improve your mental health. It helps prevent the build-up of negative emotions, which can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical health issues. Speak your heart to free your mind. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast. If you feel that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description. And point number 3 is that they made a mistake. So when we're talking about your ex-dumper's biggest nightmares, the thought that they've actually made a mistake is probably top of the list. And it links in with what we've been speaking about already today. In point number 2, we were speaking about how they didn't want to be seen as a bad person, and that this thought probably came even before the breakup took place, when they were considering whether or not to continue the relationship. And those thoughts and feelings can really play into the fact of, what if I make a mistake? What if this is a bad call? What if I shouldn't be ending the relationship and then everybody hates me? Now that is how point number 2 links with point number 3. Point number 1, we were speaking about how they're worried that they might not find a good match. And if they can't find a good match going forward, they are going to be looking in that metaphorical mirror and considering, did I make the right choice? Because I've been dumped myself before my dumpee, I've been dumped after my dumpee, and yet the only relationship where there was somebody who wanted to be with me, I dumped them. Now that is a very possible scenario. So if we consider those things and more, your ex-dumper is definitely going to be worried that they're making a mistake. Because although we can somewhat predict the future, it absolutely doesn't mean it's going to be the case. Nobody knows for certain what's around the next corner. Nobody knows for certain how our feelings are going to ebb and flow. Before you met your ex, you would never have said that you loved them, but you hadn't met them. Then you did meet your ex, and you and them fell in love together. Now, sadly, they fell out of romantic love with you and they ended the relationship. But what we can see here is that when you never knew each other, you of course didn't love each other. Then you did meet each other and you fell in love. Then sadly, your dumper fell out of love. And now your feelings are no doubt up and down themselves. What we can see here is that feelings evolve over time. They can't be predicted. We might love someone at one point in our life and not love them later down the line. But this also means it can come back. And your ex-dumper doesn't know how they're going to be feeling in 6 months, a year, 18 months. They can't predict that. It's a gamble. It's a risk. It's something they are doing because they feel it is right. But what if they're wrong? And this is why a dumper will very rarely end a relationship on a whim. Now, if, for instance, you cheated on your partner they find out, they might instantly lose romantic emotional attraction and they might instantly dump you. That is a situation where a decision is made quickly. But by and large, most of the time, a dumper becomes a dumper over many months. Not days, not really even weeks, often many months of slowly but surely romantic emotional attraction being lost, and they don't want to end that connection. They don't want to do it. They're worried that they might be making a big mistake. And that's why when a relationship does end, the dumpee will often say, wow, this person who once said they loved me, they're now looking at me with very cold eyes. Or maybe you were dumped over text or a call, and you think that their voice or the words that they used seemed so cold. They are an ice queen or an ice king. It's almost like an alien spaceship has picked them up and switched them with someone who looks exactly the same, but no longer has their personality. They seem completely different from within. And this is because a dumper has to switch their personality almost into a mode where they can get through what they're seeing as a very difficult situation. This is when we have that thought and that feeling of when it's done, it's done. You know, when your ex-dumper does end that relationship, it's very unlikely that they came to the decision today. The likelihood is romantic emotional attraction has been slowly lost over time, and when they finally got to the very, very low point, that's when they ended the relationship, and that's why you can't persuade them. You can't just say, hey, that's a bad decision, let's stay together. You can't do that because the relationship in their mind ended a long time ago. Slowly but surely it was ending. You could say that when they've checked out actually a long time ago, and they just needed to really get to that position of where they can say it's over. So that's why you can't beg or plead or reason and often find success. You're not going to do that because when they've gone, they've gone. But the good news is, dumpees, is that your ex-dumper is always going to have a nightmare thought that they've made a mistake. And if these feelings start to regrow, just as they declined, slowly but surely, due to you as a dumpee living your life the right way, following the advice that I give in my podcast and via my audio coaching service, if the attraction then grows to hit the necessary high point, this is when your ex-dumper will realize their nightmare has come true. They will realize they've made a mistake and they will want to get back together.